Okay, so today we're going to dive deep into the world of Bushido.
All right.
And no, it's not all about those epic samurai sword fights you see in the movies.
Right.
Those are awesome.
Yeah.
We're going way deeper than that, exploring this code, this unwritten code that shaped like an entire culture.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating stuff. And to help us on this journey today, we have excerpts from Bushido, The Soul of Japan.
Great source.
Oh, it's an incredible book. So get ready for some serious insights into what it really meant to be a samurai
Looking forward to it.
beyond, just the battlefield stuff.
Absolutely.
So to kick things off, what's really interesting about Bushido is it wasn't like a set of laws or anything like that.
Right. It's more like this moral compass that was passed down through generations. Yeah, it was all about really embodying these values,
Yeah.
inheriting a way of life that went like soul deep.
It really was about shaping your character from the inside out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And our source, Inazo Nitobe, she makes this super clear.
Right.
He talks about this deep connection between Bushido and Zen Buddhism. What's your take on that connection?
Well, it's fascinating because Zen emphasizes intuition and direct experience over written words, which aligns perfectly with Bushido's focus on instinctive action and a really ingrained sense of right and wrong.
Right. So it's not about like memorizing a bunch of rules.
Oh,
It's
right.
about this deeper understanding.
It's like an inner knowing, a gut feeling that guides you, rather than just blindly following a set of rules.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about like the heat of battle.
Right.
Samurai had to make split-second decisions.
Yeah, precisely. But, it wasn't about turning these warriors into mindless killing machines or anything.
Right.
It was really about cultivating these core virtues. And some of them might surprise you.
All right, let's unpack those virtues. Where should we start?
Let's start with rectitude.
Okay, rectitude.
Yeah, it goes beyond just simple justice. It's about having this unwavering inner compass. Imagine a steel sword, strong and unyielding.
Yeah.
Rectitude is that same strength, but in the samurai's soul.
Like not a strong inner core.
Yeah.
Nitobe actually calls it a power of resolution.
Huh.
And he shares this incredible story about Odadoken to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah. Odadoken, a man of action, even in his final moments.
Right. So for those who don't know, Odadoken was this amazing castle builder. But tragically, he was ambushed and fatally wounded.
It's a powerful story.
But instead of giving into the chaos and panic, he basically sat down and composed his death poem.
Wow.
Talk about grace under pressure.
I mean, can you imagine facing your own mortality with that kind of composure?
I mean, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about Bushido's emphasis on facing any situation with this unwavering spirit.
That's fascinating.
And, there are parallels to the chivalry code of medieval Europe,
Okay, I see that.
but there's this distinctly Japanese essence to it.
Right, it's like its own unique thing.
Yeah, and it's this constant interplay of action and restraint, duty and compassion
Right.
that makes Bushido so compelling.
I can see that tension between what we might think of as like opposing forces, especially when you consider a virtue like benevolence.
Right.
You wouldn't typically associate warriors with benevolence.
You wouldn't, would you? But it was paramount in Bushido.
Interesting. So how does that work?
Well, Nitobe compares it to a mother-like quality.
A mother-like quality.
Yeah, which might seem like a contradiction at first.
It does make you wonder how such a seemingly gentle quality fits into the life of a warrior.
We see, while samurai were undoubtedly fierce warriors, they were also expected to show compassion.
Compassion.
Yeah, especially towards a defeated enemy.
That's unexpected.
Right. And there's this famous image in Japanese art that depicts this beautifully.
Okay, tell me more.
It shows this battle-hardened warrior, now a priest riding backward on a cow.
Okay, I have to admit that doesn't sound very intimidating for a warrior.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the story behind it is what makes it so powerful.
Okay, what happened?
So, this warrior, he was about to strike down an enemy soldier, but the man, he refused to reveal his identity.
Really?
Yeah, and there's this unwritten rule that taking the life of someone of significantly lower status was seen as dishonorable.
Wow.
So this act of mercy, it had a profound impact on the warrior, leading him to renounce violence and choose a path of peace.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is a powerful example of Bushido's emphasis on compassion, even in the face of conflict.
That story really underscores the complexity of Bushido for me. It
Right.
wasn't just about brute force, but also about moral restraint and showing compassion even in the heat of battle.
Absolutely.
It's a powerful lesson even today. That story really highlights how complex Bushido could be. It wasn't just about, like you said, brute force, but also this moral restraint, showing compassion even to your enemies.
It's a great example of how Bushido went beyond the battlefield.
Totally. And speaking of unexpected virtues,
Yeah.
Nitobe also talks about politeness.
Right.
And I get that manners were obviously important in Japanese society, but how does that fit into this whole warrior ethos?
Yeah, it's not just about knowing which fork to use at dinner, right?
Right.
Bushido saw politeness as this form of self-mastery, like an outward display of inner strength, you know?
Okay, so if you can stay cool and respectful even when things get tough,
Exactly.
even when someone's trying to get under your skin,
You become practically untouchable?
because you're not letting them see you sweat.
Exactly. There's this ancient saying, cultivate your mind so thoroughly that even when you are seated calmly, no ruffian would dare attack you.
Wow, that's powerful.
It's about projecting this aura of strength and composure that aggression just bounces right off.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's like building that inner steel we talked about with rectitude.
Yeah,
But this time it's about being unflappable, unbreakable.
I like that.
Okay, so moving on to another virtue. Veracity, basically being truthful and honest.
Right.
That seems pretty straightforward, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But with Bushido, it gets a little complicated.
Oh, how so?
So for a samurai, their word was their bond.
Oh, okay.
They believed that a true warrior would never stoop to lies.
Because it was dishonorable.
Exactly. It wasn't about being morally wrong in like a religious sense. It was about being dishonorable. It showed weakness of character.
So lying was like admitting you weren't strong enough to uphold your end of the bargain.
Precisely. They even looked down on swearing oaths, which is interesting.
Really?
Yeah, because a samurai's word was his oath.
It was enough.
Exactly. There was no need to reinforce it with anything more.
Interesting. But hold on. Nitobe mentions something about this unwavering honesty not always extending to the merchant class.
Ah, yes. Good catch.
So there was like a double standard within Bushido.
In a way, now remember, in feudal Japan, merchants were kind of at the bottom of the social ladder.
Right.
They weren't held to the same strict code of honor as the samurai.
That makes sense.
And in a system without the legal contracts we have today,
Right.
a merchant's word and their reputation, that was everything.
It was all about trust.
Exactly. Maintaining that trust, showing that you were reliable, because a damaged reputation could ruin you.
It was everything.
Nitobe actually describes these fascinating promissory notes used by merchants.
What were they like?
So instead of all the legal jargon we're used to seeing,
Yeah.
they'd write things like, if I don't repay this debt, you can call me a fool.
Wow. Talk about putting it all on the line.
Right. It was all about leveraging shame and public opinion to enforce agreements.
So even though they weren't bound by the samurai code, they still had to tap into that same cultural value of honor.
Exactly. It was a
Sure.
different system, but the underlying principle was the same.
That's so interesting. Okay, so we've got rectitude, benevolence, politeness, veracity, and of course the cornerstone of it all, honor.
Right.
And how could we forget loyalty?
Of course, because with honor comes great responsibility.
Right. And speaking of loyalty,
Yes.
Nitobe tells this really heartbreaking story about a samurai named Shigemori who was torn between his father and his lord.
Ah, yes. Shigemori's dilemma. A classic example of the impossible choices samurai sometimes faced.
It really highlights the weight of loyalty in Bushido. It's a story that really sticks with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This whole idea of being caught between two loyalties.
Yeah, it really gets to the heart of Bushido and the impossible dilemmas these samurai face.
So just to recap, Shigemori's father basically rebels against his lord, right?
Exactly, putting Shigemori right in the middle of it all.
And he's completely torn. If he sides with his father, he's betraying his oath to his lord.
Right.
But if he stays loyal to his lord, he has to turn against his own family.
It's a lose-lose situation and a powerful illustration of the moral complexities of that time.
I can't even imagine being in that position. How do you even begin to choose?
You know, in the end, Shigemori was so torn, he actually prayed for death.
Wow. He saw no way out.
It's a stark reminder of the immense pressure loyalty placed on a samurai.
Their loyalty to their lord was above everything else, wasn't
It
it?
really was. Their entire lives revolved around their lord.
And often they were expected to put their lord's needs above their own, even above their families.
Exactly. It was a different time with a different set of values.
Values that are kind of hard to wrap our heads around sometimes, but fascinating nonetheless.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about Rectitude, benevolence, politeness, veracity.
Right, and of course honor, which is really at the very core of Bushido.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we can't forget loyalty, which, as we just saw, could be incredibly demanding.
To say the least.
So what's the final piece of this Bushido puzzle?
Well, the last one isn't so much a moral virtue like the others.
Okay.
It's more of a defining characteristic of the samurai, and that's self-control.
Ah, yes. The stoic warrior, always in control, never letting their emotions get the best of them.
Exactly. That classic image of the samurai that we all have in our heads. That's Bushido's emphasis on self-mastery in action.
Right. But it's not just about appearances, is it? It's not just about looking tough.
No, not at all. Bushido saw self-control as absolutely essential for rational decision-making.
Okay, so keeping a cool head was crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially under pressure. They had to be able to act honorably no matter what.
And that meant keeping their emotions in check.
Precisely. Joy, anger, grief, all of it. They were trained to suppress any outward display of emotion.
Wow, even if someone like stole their rice cakes or something.
Well, maybe they'd crack a smile on the inside.
Right.
But seriously, Nitobe even talks about how, even in the face of tragedy, composure was key.
So no matter what life threw at them, they had to maintain that calm exterior.
Exactly. Because any outward display of emotion was seen as a weakness.
I can see how that would be important in a warrior culture. You wouldn't want your enemies to see you crack.
Exactly. Vulnerability could be misconstrued.
Right, so it was all about maintaining that air of strength and control.
It was as much about survival as anything else.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Nitobe's book, it focuses mainly on the samurai, right?
He does.
But how much did Bushido actually influence Japanese society as a whole?
That's a great question, and it's something that Nitobe addresses directly in the book.
Okay, what does he say?
He believed that Bushido wasn't just some warrior code. He saw it as the soul of Japan. He believed its values permeated all levels of society.
Interesting. So even if you weren't a samurai, you were still raised with these ideals.
Precisely. Bushido provided a common ground, a shared set of values that helped unify what was a very diverse population.
It was like a cultural blueprint then.
Exactly. It was a guidebook for how to live a good and honorable life regardless of your social status.
So these values, they seeped into the collective consciousness of Japan?
Precisely. Even commoners knew the stories and legends of the samurai.
It's fascinating how these values transcended social class.
It really is. And it speaks to the power of Bushido as a unifying force in Japanese culture.
And it all circles back to what Nitobe calls the Yamato spirit, right?
Exactly.
Which he compares to the wild cherry blossom.
Beautiful analogy, isn't it?
It is. He explains how it represents something that's both strong and beautiful, something uniquely Japanese.
It's a perfect metaphor for the Japanese spirit.
It is, because the cherry blossom, while delicate and fleeting, it embodies this incredible strength and resilience.
Just like the Japanese people and their culture.
It's a reminder that true strength isn't always about brute force.
Exactly. It's about resilience, grace, and the ability to weather any storm.
Which are all qualities embodied in Bushido.
Precisely. And it's why I believe its legacy extends far beyond the battlefield.
I completely agree. It offers valuable insights not just into Japanese culture, but into the human condition as a whole.
Absolutely. It's a timeless reminder that honor, integrity, and compassion are values that transcend time and culture.
And they're values that are just as relevant today as they were centuries ago.
Couldn't agree more.
It's been such a pleasure exploring the world of Bushido with you today. It's given me a lot to think about.
It's been my pleasure as well. And for our listeners out there, a final thought to ponder.
Yes. Let's leave them with something to chew on.
If Bushido is more than just swords and samurai, what are the weapons of character that matter most in our modern world?
What qualities do we need to cultivate to face the challenges of today?
And to build a better, more honorable future for everyone?
That's a question worth reflecting on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Bushido.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and as always, keep those questions coming.